Good morning, everyone. I'd like to invite you to the Climate and Environment Subcommittee meeting of the 15th of June. Welcome to members of the public to our committee. Do we have anyone online today at all? We don't have anyone online. First of all, I would like to ask for our council blessing to be read by Mr. Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for my pronunciation, but I'm going to try. Ia mautu I whiriwhiri ana I ngā take kimua I o matu araroa. I pono ana matu kei kaha tonu ki te whakapau. Mahara hapai mōna hapori I mahi me matu. Mi kaha hoki, matu katoa ki whahehua ki toki tika. Ta matu mahi a ma ti tiro whakamua. Mite hihiri kei tā ti ahi I roti I ti kotahitanga miti arawa. I will do that in English now, but I've tried. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just, so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership in a spirit of harmony and compassion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Judd. That was excellent. So now we'll move on to apologies. I have received 2 apologies. The first one is from Councillor Shelley Warwick, who is unavailable today, and also from Mr. Tim Sutton, who will be joining us about 10 o'clock. So now I will move on to item. So can I have a mover and a seconder for those apologies, please? Mr. Black is moving that. Seconder, Councillor Hanford. Thank you. So all those in favour? Those against? The motion is passed. So now we'll move on to item 4, which is declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. So now we'll move on to item 5, which is relating to public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. So we have one public speaker, Mr. Alexander. Would you like to come forward and speak and sit at the desk there? And the light hopefully will go red so that that everyone can hear you here and online. You have, as you know the rules, but 3 minutes speaking time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I've never come to a climate and environment meeting before, and I just thought I'd come along today, but I wasn't intending to speak. But I see some items here on freshwater. Kapiti's got some big problems to sort out in the future, and I just thought I'd remind you of those. One of the things is the sewage overflow into the Whaitua estuary, where you have monofilaments going into there, into the river, and going out into the sea down the coast. We used to, the fresh water that went in the Whaitua River, we used to have around the estuary and south, back in the 80s and going into the 90s, shellfish there, pippies, as many as you could find. We used to have crabs and everything. Now we've got nothing, absolutely nothing, right? And at the start of the sewerage system for Kapiti, late 70s, the water would go into the sand dunes, into the forest down there. They'd have settling ponds and put it into the forest, and that would settle, and so that took care of everything. But now it just goes through the plant, but it doesn't capture a lot of the stuff. The only way to do that, of course, is to put it into the sand dunes in the area there around the Whaitua estuary. Probably could facilitate that around that area. So that's just a thought for you, and that's what Levin does, and it works fine. So we've got a real problem there, environment thing going on there with that area. The next thing to do with fresh water is we've got a proposed dam on our long-term plan to build. Well, no one builds dams in the world anymore, they pull them down. There's a far better answer to do that, to fix that, without completely mucking up the Waikanae River and the Mangatook stream. There's a simple system, just put a tunnel through the hill to the Whaitua River, and that would solve the problem. Simple as that, like was done in Whaitua and Te Mana for their fresh water for Wellington, through to the Rongorongo River. Simple system. Doesn't if you're going to build a dam up there, you actually then cause, if the dam were to fail, it would take out all Waikanae and Praparan Beach. We've got to look at that as well. That's a big problem there. So anyhow, I just want to throw those two to you for discussion, that we could look at it in the future, trying to fix all that up, if possible. And there's a heap of other ideas in my mind, suggestions I've got for you, but I won't bring those in today because they cover other topics and that. But anyway, I just want you to keep that in mind, and as we go forward, that's okay. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Do we have any questions from the committee? So thank you for speaking. As you will have noted on our agenda, we do have a discussion on the Kapiti Whaitua process, which is looking at our fresh water. It's going to discuss our fresh water. So you may be interested in staying to listen to that.
Yeah, I just picked that up there in the minutes I just picked up. That's why I thought I'd bring up articles on that. Anyhow, so we've got a lot of thinking ahead to go as we go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for coming along and speaking.
Thank you.
So now we will move on to item 6, which is members' business. Is there any members' business? There is none, thank you. So now we'll move on to updates. And so with our agenda, we are hoping this meeting's planned to end by 12:30. We have a number of updates and reports, and so the plan is to maybe have a break about 11, depending on where we are sitting in particular items. So now I would like to move into our first updates, and this update is is an external person coming to speak here, who's the chair of the CWB, the Cycleways, Bridleways and Advisory Group. So, Mr. Henderson, would you like to come up to the front table, and Janice Hill, who is council staff who supports this advisory group. So while they're coming up here, before the meeting, a summary of the work that the CWB does was circulated to you, and Mr. Henderson is going to provide a presentation, I won't think, which has a PowerPoint presentation. No.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. I'd like to put that up. Greetings, everybody.
So just have to wait until
Oh, sorry, that's not up yet.
until the light's red. Thank you, so that everyone online can hear.
Greetings, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. Called Bruce Henderson, Takawingo. I live down at Te Horo Beach, born in Otaki, so after many years travelling all over the world, I've actually arrived back almost where I started. So, and it's wonderful to be here, and I managed to get involved in this, partly through my passion for cycling, but also for the outdoors in general. So here I am for that. No, it definitely wasn't me. Thank you. When I was first asked to do this, I spoke to a number of people about CWB, and they said, "Who?" So when I designed this PowerPoint, I decided the first thing to do was to actually introduce who we actually are. So we're actually fundamentally a volunteer group representing all the numbers and the groups that you can see up behind on the slide. It's quite a diverse group, and we cover, as you can see, all sorts of different types of recreational and transport use, and all sorts of age groups. Just going quickly through some of them, for example, in cycling, we've got the on-road clubs, or the competitive ones, recreational cyclists, which in my mind I tend to slightly separate. And this is a hugely diverse group, because you get everything from children out riding their BMXs around the park down at Paraparumu Beach, through to groups of oldies like me on our e-bikes,
riding up and down the expressway paths and all the other paths, going to meet each other for coffee in cafes and things like that. And so it's a very, very wide group. The mountain bikes, of course, their prime focus is off-road, particularly in Whaitua Farm. Walkers, joggers, dog walkers, but also our trails are used a lot by groups like Park Run and the Wellington Tri Half, which starts down at the beach and runs up through the Waikanae River stream bridges and pathways. So again, it's a very, very diverse way of using it. Disabilities includes both visual and auditory and physical disabilities. So we allow for wheelchairs and the little Ono, the little wheelchair. You'll see a picture of it later, which is sort of like a four-wheel drive wheelchair, which was designed and built initially in Otaki. A new group we have is called small wheels. This, of course, is the type of transport which includes rollerblades, skateboards, scooters, e-scooters and things like that. And of course they are very much enlarging. And so we actually have to sort of cater for a very wide variety of different types of transport. This is us. As you can see, we are quite a diverse crowd. This was from the post that the council put up on the opening of the Peka Peka to Otaki pathway, which has been hugely successful. We had over 400 users on the first weekend, massive numbers. Every day when I drive past or ride through there, there are other riders up and down the cycleway. It's hugely popular. There are people coming in from Manawatu, and somebody was talking to a couple from Petone that had come up specially to ride it. So it's hugely popular. This is a picture of some of, it's an ogo, that was the word I was looking for. As you can see it on the beach there. That was actually at the kite festival. You've got, as you can see, the horses, the riders, the children, the dog walkers, and everybody all in one. It's a very interesting and diverse community to work with too, and it's quite different from place to place. Possibly the biggest single contrast I could pick out would be in somewhere like Waikanae, where you have probably primarily an older demographic, certainly during the day, because there's a lot of quite large retirement homes, and there are, for example, people who may no longer have their car licenses, but they can ride an e-bike, and so that's their prime form of transport. And they'll head up to the cafes at Mahara Place and places like that. You compare that with Otaki, where you've got quite a different demographic, and you've got large numbers of people for whom bikes are their primary transport. And the difference there, and it's quite an interesting comparison, is that very few of them wear helmets. It's just a cultural difference. But there's also, because there are so many bikes in Otaki, the drivers are far more used to seeing them all over the road. And so the result is drivers up there just take bikes for granted, right out on the road, which is less so down here or say in Waikanae. And it's a little bit like how in Europe it's changed now, where bikes are so much part of the culture, and it's almost cars take second place. So there's a little bit of that going on in Otaki. Our numbers, of course, are growing steadily through all the different forms of transport. Anybody who was out riding during the COVID lockdown, that was the only way they could, they weren't able to go to work, so all of that part was off the agenda. So they were all getting out on their bikes. A lot of the bikes didn't look as though they'd actually seen daylight for years. But they were out there, and there were families and children and couples and all sorts of people with dogs up and down the roads, and of course they had the roads almost to themselves. So it was, again, that was just an indication of possible cultural changes. This next slide gives you a few of these are straight off our terms of reference, and this outlines what we are: to be proactive, to advise, facilitate, and make recommendations to council staff. A number of people, we work in the Parks and Reserve space under Mike Mendonça. Janice here is our champion, our coordinator. And so we've got a very, very good team running. We meet here in this room every 2 months approximately. A lot of sharing. The meetings are quite informal. There's a lot of sort of to and fro discussion rather than the slightly more formal nature of formal council meetings. We've taken time this year to actually do quite a comprehensive rewrite of our terms of reference, and I'll be presenting those to the full council sometime in one of the upcoming meetings fairly shortly. That phrase at the top really does reflect why we're here and what we do. This is our lifestyle choice. The people on CWB, they are passionate about what they do, or we do, on our own forms of transport. We all, should we say, step up for our own particular sector. So part of our brief is to actually bring all those sectors together and share how we can actually make the different groups work together. So the issues like the horses on the expressway, we're unique. I haven't found another council or rohe where horses are very much part of the system. And it's a strength we've got, because that becomes one of our attractions from the point of view of the equestrian community, saying we can ride on the Kapiti Coast. At the same time, we've got other variations where a lot of people, for example, feel safe riding their bikes on the footpath. Well, that brings issues with cycles versus pedestrians. And so again, that's something that our group has a look at and looks for ways of working through and mitigating those issues. There are aspects, those are some of the documents there that we work with. Have I gone on to that one? Yes. Incidentally, those are hyperlinks that when you're given this PowerPoint afterwards as a follow-up to the meeting, you'll be able to actually follow those up. Some of those documents do need a bit of tweaking. The sustainable transport one, for example, doesn't have an awful lot by way of concrete goals or timelines or anything like that, which means that we actually don't have specific goals we can work to, and that would be useful from the point of view of working forward. But we do get an awful lot from Waka Kotahi, NZTA. They've got a huge amount coming on at the moment that involves different types of transport, how we mesh with various forms of road transport, public transport, getting cycles on trains and things like that, which has got potential for people coming up. You can imagine a family coming up from Wellington, jump on with their bikes, jumping off in Waikanai. All the signage is there for them to ride out to Ngāmanu or somewhere like that, or Otaki and down to Māoreland. And everything is set up so that they can do that as a natural form of a family outing. Where can you find our trails? Those are the links. Some of them are local. Wellington Regional Trails is a huge amount of work that the council team has done to putting all the trails up on there. There's a number of brochures. You can go to Find Your Wild and see what are the different possibilities are of different types of track you could, and walking and riding. You can enter the sort of ride or walk you want to do, and it'll come up with a few options that you can choose from. It's beautifully set up. The trails map, the new map, which only came out 2 weeks ago. There's some of them down the back. If you haven't already got one, I recommend that you take it, even for just a walk on a sunny afternoon. They've got all sorts of possibilities that you can follow up. You may recognise the picture on the bottom left. That's Wharamoku, one of the tracks that comes up off the main Wharamoku stream up towards Rimu Road. And again, it's just one of the many links we can use. At this stage, up until now, CWB is primarily recreation focused. In other words, where can you walk, where can you ride, just to get out and get exercise. But under the sort of changing culture of our communities, not just Kapiti, but worldwide really, we are looking more and more at where active transport is an important part of our whole transport network. And so this is where we, as a CWB, need to look at this in terms of how we focus on what we do. So we're looking at our network more from, or as much from a day-to-day transport point of view as we do as a recreational activity. And so this is where we're pivoting on those. And those are just some of the areas that we look at. You'll recognise some of the pictures. the transport hub, that's straight off the council website. Local attractions, that's Ngā Manu events, that's that particular one, of course, is the Otaki Festival, Kite Festival. And you can see that the horses down on bottom right, that's actually down in Queen Elizabeth Park. Queen Elizabeth Park, of course, is very much part of our network, although it's actually administered by Greater Wellington, not by ourselves. So these are some of the things we're actually starting to look at in terms of where we go forward. With greater flooding and heavier rain, etc., and sea level rise, some of our networks are starting to look a little bit fragile. The Waikanai River, for example, can get quite badly flooded, and that has got the potential to take out parts of the network sometimes for some time, though a lot of work's is going in to try and make that more storm-proof. But at the same time, what was the other one? Oh, if you travel down from Otahanga down to the Waimanu lagoons, you'll find that parts of it are underwater on a very high tide. Now that never used to happen, but it does now. So looking at how we actually raise that part of the track higher or reroute it so that it goes round instead of being underwater, that type of resilience. Safer on-road sectors between existing off-road paths. There are still gaps in the network, which means that people they feel less confident riding on the road than they do on our tracks. So, for example, roadside shed, laned off paths where people can ride is a lot safer than just trying to ride on the main road surface. So we need to actually try and separate those out for safety. Child-safe routes to all schools. You may have seen the recent publicity about what we call Bike Bus, which is an innovation that's come in a number of countries where a whole lot of children get together and they all bike to school together and are chaperoned by adults on bikes, and it's much safer than having sort of individual children riding amongst traffic. So there are changes like that. The extension of cycle racks. This is a really, really important one. If you own a $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 e-bike, you don't want to leave it leaning against a tree. So a safe place where you can see it, but where it's locked up against a locky dock such as out the front, or a good steel bar with a big D-lock or something like that, means your bike is a lot safer. Now with larger numbers of people, we need larger numbers of places where we can lock them. I did, about a year ago, did a count in the area around Mahara Place and on the grass over towards where the medical centre is. I counted 17 bikes leaning against trees, lying on the ground, chained to posts and things like that. That's an awful lot of bikes in one place. It's much safer if they can lock them up somewhere. More seating. This is what older people have asked for, particularly along the expressway pathway. That, you know, for older people, it's not so easy to travel all that far. So somewhere they can sit, take a rest, contemplate the view, enjoy the sun is becoming more and more part of what we need on our paths. And of course, continue to find and develop walking and riding opportunities throughout the district. And to show you, this is what you might call the grand plan at the moment, our proposed trail network. I'm actually going to ask Janice, would you like to speak to this? Because you're the expert on which bits are which.
Is there a pointer on this?
There is a pointer, yes. Not sure where it is, but...
Yes, there you go. So this is a proposal for an expansion and a connection of our network. Sorry.
Excuse me.
Thanks, Jocelyn. It's hard to point and talk without having my back to you. Apologies. So the green line. Actually, I'll do it over the. I don't want to blind Jocelyn, but I'll. It's easier for me to do that. So the green line is what we're calling the Coast 35. That's the expressway track combined with the Te Ara o Whaitua through Queen Elizabeth Park. So together, with a little off-road path down Poplar Ave, we have 35 kilometres of off-road shared trail, multi-use trail actually, that links all the towns in our district now. So that's what we're really promoting, is the fact that it's a really efficient way to move through the district, walking, biking, running, or even horse riding. So that's built, that's existing, which is fantastic. And in biking terms, or walking terms, that's grade 1. That's the easiest. It's paved south of Peka Peka. It's gravel north of Peka Peka. But that's a very easy family, certainly because of the paved section south of Peka Peka, wheelchair friendly as well as small wheels friendly. So that's sort of product 1, if you like. This is the Waikanai River Trail. At the moment, connects the estuary with Old State Highway 1. As signalled in the open spaces strategy and also in Putiki Tai, there's potential to expand that up to from Waikanai up to Rikarangi via an off-road trail. We also have here Whaitua Farm, which is a really big connector, as Bruce said, particularly popular with mountain bikers, but also connects horses, walkers, etc. as well. And then in Otaki, we have the Otaki River Trail, both on the north bank and the south bank. So the yellow, I'll come back and talk about the yellow, but they are connecting roads. What this plan does do is highlight really important sections on roads that we might want to look at connecting via off-road trails in future. But largely these are quiet roads, but as we become increasingly urbanised, it might be a good idea to use that road corridor for off-roading. The blue line is partially existing and partially would need to be connected with some new sections. We're calling the Foothills Trail. Effectively, that would be connecting Campbell Mill Road via the Mangakutukutuku Valley through to Rikarangi. Then you have Mangoni South Road, and then the Mangoni Walkway, which is currently a walkway at the moment, but administered by DOC, but DOC is interested in seeing that upgraded. What this would do is enable, as you can see, tons of local loops. I should also say the grade. So the Foothills Trail would be grade 2 to 3, so wouldn't be paved, would be easy riding, sort of 4-wheel drive track kind of condition. You could ride side by side or run side by side or walk side by side. So wide, not terribly difficult, but certainly a step up from the flat coastal route. But what it also does is provide some resiliency for Rikarangi, Nikau Valley, Mangakutukutuku Valley as well, and definitely would provide lots of easy recreational routes for pretty much everyone in the district. The red line is actually 90 kilometres from North Manukau Road through the backcountry to Battle Hill. Most of that actually exists. There's about 20 kilometres that don't exist. It's just not connected. It's largely old logging or tram lines that have been sitting in the bush for 80 to 100 years, gathering character, but they still exist. Yes, they do need some work. Tramvers certainly are aware of Waitoru Valley, Renata Hut, and this is Akatara Forest. Largely the southern section is in the Akatara Forest Park and the northern section is in Tararua Forest Park. Obviously you can see that Otaki Gorge Road is a really key connecting route through to Otaki Forks. What this does is also and the grade for this would be about 3 to 4. We certainly wouldn't be going higher than grade 4. What that means is it's sort of medium to experienced. I'm avoiding the word expert. It certainly wouldn't be. But it might not all be, it's not single track, but it's certainly probably not the ability for you to ride side by side that like you would on the other trails. Some of this is existing, as I said, and needs a little bit of work, but there's a few new sections that would need to be built, but they are on public land. We have talked with Greater Wellington and Department of Conservation about this. They're very interested on the basis that they don't maintain it. So this is something that's proposed. It's for the future. What it would do and what the whole network does for the district, it would really make us a trails district for a start, which would help us attract young professionals, particularly, to come live here, because this is the kind of activity they want to do, as well as provide fantastic recreational opportunities for everyone up and down the district, and really enhance what we already have. So yes, there would be local loops of many magnitudes for every resident in the district, plus 90 kilometres would be a multi-day trail that would have, we believe, would have significant tourism benefits for the district as well. And the advantage this has over other trails, like for example the Hefe, where you go in at one end and you pop out the other. Here you actually you're never far away from a warm beer, a cold beer, and a hot shower. So you have accommodation points, to use our existing industry. It would also have potential for events. So it has a lot of potential. It is a proposal. We have worked through some of the initial logistics, but the next stage for this would be take it to a feasibility study. Between the red line, the blue line, and the green line, we're looking at 217 kilometres of off-road trail, of which 30 needs to be built. So a lot of it is existing.
Thank you, Janice. Steal that back if I may. Thank you. So that's us. That's where we're at the moment. That's what we're working on. So thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to take questions.
So thank you very much, Bruce and Janice, for your presentation. So are there any questions from the committee?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Councillor Coe.
Thank you very much, Bruce. That's really interesting, and you're obviously doing fantastic work in terms of, making sure the infrastructure is there and it's easy to use and all that sort of thing. I just wondered to what extent you get involved in being advocates in the community for active transport, which, as you mentioned, is really, really important. And if not, is that something you would consider doing or consider doing more of?
Yes, well, in a sense we do, because all of our representatives are passionate members of their own groups. So, for example, I happen to be a member of Kapiti Cycling Action, and we have Kapiti Cycling Action representatives, and so anything that comes up at our meetings is taken back to that group, so that they're aware of what we're doing, and they, of course, organise their own publicity as well. Though they're more primarily a lobby group. The equestrians are quite tireless in promoting equestrian not only within the Kapiti region but wider. I know they often speak with local, with adjacent councils, Pororua and particularly Horowhenua, trying to promote equestrian through there. We don't at the moment do a lot of on-the-ground publicity within our own rohe, but it is something we probably very definitely could look at.
I was just thinking more in terms of making people aware that network now exists, because people have like a vague understanding of it, but yes. That brochure obviously is a key thing.
All the information is out there. Yeah, it's probably a matter of action. It goes out on Facebook. I know there are links. I don't know. I don't use Twitter. It tends to be a bit toxic. But other social media, and I know the different groups promote this stuff through their own networks. An awful lot of people, of course, are very, very independent. I know when I'm riding, I know a lot of the members of the cycling groups, but I could spend weeks and see dozens and dozens of people out walking and riding and not recognise one of them as being a member of the existing groups. So it's a matter of ongoing publicity through social media. You would have seen the stuff about the bike bus in the paper, and the local papers, plural. In fact, even the New Zealand Herald was first to run that one for some reason. It's probably something we could look at it in a more structured way.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Judge,
Thank you for the,
please.
Yes. With reference to your moving forward slide,
Yes.
you say that you're interested in child's safe routes to schools. Would you agree with the research, which I haven't got in front of me, that says that for up to intermediate school, the safe radius is a kilometre, or if you can have a safe cycling zone for a kilometre, that works to encourage cycling, and 2 kilometres for colleges. Is that your experience or view?
In the cases of our schools, would to include the vast majority of the students and pupils, it would probably need to be wider than that. I would agree with you. It would catch a large percentage of the walkers and riders and scooters. It wouldn't catch all of them. I know because I was deputy principal at Raumati Beach School for some time. In fact, we actually had students coming in from as far north and south as Otaki and Paikakariki. So there's a lot of overlap between the schools. So there will always be a motor vehicle transport element within the school, or around the schools. But yes, certainly getting the nearest kilometre for primary schools equipped with really, really safe routes would be a very good start.
What would you say the characteristics of a safe route are within that 1 kilometre?
The ability for children to ride knowing their visual capability. For example, children younger than about 9 are known to have tunnel vision in terms of how they operate. So off-road would be by far, and protected would be by far the most desirable. Whether that's practical within the physical environment of some of the schools is open to question. But yes, I think off-road or fully protected with barriers of some sort would be very useful. Did that cover it?
Yep. And one last question. On the Coast 35, it would be great. Do you agree, that's my question, if it should be the Coast 37 and there was specific safe cycling from Paikakariki Station to the actual start of the trail in QE2 Park? Because there's some signs up on the road, but there's no other provision for those people that arrive at the station to start the cycling.
The signage, I think, is still very much being worked on. I haven't been down to Paikakariki in the last while. I know there were signs going in. There was a lot of work. It was going to be signposted all the way from Ames Street through the township, and I know that the Kapiti Coast cycle route was being modified fairly close to where the school is to actually make it safer for riders to get through that particular area, because there was a bit of a tension point on one of the junctions.
Yeah.
So that's being modified. So far as the northern end is concerned, the PP2O construction team were actually working very hard to get the network open, but they still recognise that there was still signage to be done to complete that process. Their focus was on just getting it open, and we'll sort the signage out afterwards. So more signage all the way down the route is definitely a must, but that is being worked on at both ends.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you. So I'm aware that we have 4 more people wishing to speak. So if I can just remind members to ensure that their questions are related to the presentation, and if possible, limit your questions to just one. So next up we have Kim. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Kia ora.
We'll move off now.
It's a good one.
Oh, sorry.
So yes, there are 4
There are more questions.
There's 4 more people. I'm just saying that
sorry.
given
Okay.
our time.
Okay.
Take a note off.
Maybe it's the teacher in me.
Kia ora. My name's Kim from Ngahapura, Otaki. That was awesome. It's nice to know that there's someone out there actually dedicated to watch the stuff. My question was about the use of the bridleway, and probably to ask whether your group has the capacity to collect data on who's actually using those bridleways and pathways. And I asked in context of going north of Otaki into Otaki North Levin shared pathway. We're having that discussion at the moment, and whether you know of similar groups to the north, or whether, because I know you'll probably stop at Kapiti, or whether you're interested in going further into that discussion, because your expertise would be valuable there.
We're very interested. I personally am very interested because, in fact, I travel northward quite a lot. I spend a lot of time at meetings up in Palmerston North. I've engaged with the O2NL construction team since they first started consulting, and I'm very, very keen to see the network continue past Otaki and through to north of Levin. I've already had quite a lot of input. I worked briefly with the Horowhenua District Council before the last election. Unfortunately, that seems to have folded a little bit due to changes of personnel after the election. But I think it's very, very important that we do continue that northward. It's got the potential to make an even longer trail than we've got now. And so, yes, I would be very keen to see that happen.
Great.
Regarding numbers, yes, there is data being collected on occasion. I know the council does use data collection points on various parts of the network, the existing network, and a gentleman named Richard Young, who has a traffic research company, has actually had counters out on the Pekapeka to Otaki route. That's where we got the numbers. The graphs are available probably to the council, but I'm not sure where to find them at the moment. They were presented to us at the PP2O Community Liaison Group meeting last
so
Monday evening.
Cool.
So yes, the data is collected.
Great. And my second comment question is about the Otaki community and their cycling culture, because it has been that way for a very long time.
Yes.
I grew up in that culture. Needless to say, I teach my children to wear helmets. But I wonder, because we have got a very strong culture of, and for me growing up, it was about teaching your children to be safe on the road, no matter where they are, no matter if there were safe zones. And so that's what I teach my children. So I can hand on heart say I'm not 100% a helmet wearer, because that's how we grew up. And it's the same when we go to the river. We teach them every season about how to navigate the river. And so that's my onus is more on that. So I wonder if there's any information of any health and safety or accidents in Otaki given that culture.
So far as accidents are concerned, the only part that I know it, because it happens that I researched this just a couple of nights ago because I've been making a submission regarding the keeping of the footpath on the old Otaki River Bridge open. They're talking about possibly closing it because it's so narrow. I do think it needs to be left open. But in fact, so far as that part of the route was concerned, the crash analysis system that NZTA Wakakotahi uses doesn't show any cycle accidents on that part of the old main road going back to 2015. I haven't looked at the rest of Otaki, but I could very easily do that. So there is data that Wakakotahi does use. It's fairly easy to work through the different spots to see, because all the different types of accident are recorded, the type of vehicle, the number of injuries, fatalities and things like that. So the data is there.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we'll move on to Mr. Moore.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce and Janice. This is extraordinary. We really should. There's a lot to celebrate about this in our community. It's aspirational. It's enormous, and I won't repeat things like Liz Coe has said that we want this to be known about. You know, we want people to, but beyond just a map, we really need to have a real good comm strategy. So we cut through. We find out the people who are not using this, so they can get into it. My question is around. I'm a fellow Te Horian like yourself, so. People don't just stay on trails, you know, they're using the trail to go from one place
Mr. Moore, could we have the question,
and
please?
enjoy, thank you, sorry about that. And I want to find out, is the group thinking about how to access offside communities like Te Horo Beach, which is a really nice little space to go on the weekends, etc.?
There's a funding issue there, probably is the biggest single impediment. Running separate cycleways down roads like Te Horo Beach Road is not easy. It's built on swampland. The road itself is quite narrow and bumpy. I'm not sure we did do a very rough costing on how much it might cost at one stage. I know one has been looked at to run from Otaki Gorge Road roundabout up to Hauteri Cross, and that was going to be upwards of 1.5 million. Quite a lot of costing work has been done on Peka Road, for example, and again, that would be 1.5 plus. Right. So the answer is yes, we would love to have it, but it's going to be very expensive.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. So next person is Mr. Olsen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, really exciting actually. On the slide, the next slide, the one with the trails on it, as a hiker, I'm quite excited about the blue and is it the red or the orange one? Now, the blue one, I know quite a bit of it is there, but it's not linked up on it. Part of it, one of the tracks I do a lot is the Rocks track, and up the top of there, of course, it goes up to the Campbell's Mill Road. And I'm just wondering, there's a lot of confusion over the status of Campbell Mills Road, if it's open, if it's not, if we're allowed onto or not. And what I've noticed is on the north side of it, there's the
Mr.
fence.
Olsen,
I'm asking the question now.
Yeah, please.
Yeah?
Thank you.
This whole thing is the question, actually. Yeah. On the north side of it, there's a fence there, and they've taken away for the cyclists to be able to move their bikes over. And now you see cyclists lugging their bikes over the track. So my question is, what is the status of that road? Do we know, is it open or not?
Yeah, I can.
I'll hand this over to Janice, who's been working on it.
I have been working on it for quite a while. We're hoping we're near a solution, but we are still actively working on that. The southern section, about the southern 1 kilometre, the formed track strays off the legal position where it should be, and it probably follows the contours of the land and strays onto private property. And we are working with that landowner to resolve access to that.
Okay. And is there anything you...
actually, Mr. Olsen, we are...
I was just going to ask if there's anything we can do to help. That was all. with
Okay.
that.
So
We're
apologise.
actively working on
Yes.
it. Thanks.
If maybe it would be useful to have a conversation with Janice, because she's full of knowledge. Full of
Yeah,
knowledge.
She is.
Thank you. Thank you. If I can move on to Mr. Black, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for this presentation. My question is, Blue Bluff slips, how does that affect your presentation?
That's a huge one.
Is that actually part of the CWB or not?
Well, it is in the sense that a lot of riders would love to be able to ride up to Otaki Gorge Road, right up to the campsite, etc., up at the end. It's, from a walking point of view, obviously you do have to walk up and over the slip, although that's pretty unsafe. I know there is some work being done to try and work out an alternative route, but we haven't been specifically involved in that part of the discussion. I don't know whether you can enlarge on that, Janice?
Just to reiterate that the CWB as group, it was discussed at the last meeting, are very concerned about access. Yeah, would like to see cycling, walking and horse riding access.
Are there any other areas which are prone to slips like that?
Not to that extent, no.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. So our last question is from Councillor Hanford. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you so much, Bruce, and thanks, Janice. I have one question and then we'll seek leave to put a recommendation on the table, if that's okay, Madam Chair. So my question is around people cycling as a means to commute. Has there been kind of much thinking or campaigning or public education around those kind of key linkages, whether it be to the train station, to bus stops, to kind of key centres of work?
There, as you can see, we've been involved to some extent in, for example, the transport hubs one that's listed there. Yeah. I've kept in touch with the people who are developing the transport hub over here. We don't have quite the same commute issues as the major cities do, but we do have specific routes. Probably the most important one is Kapiti Road, because it's extremely heavy traffic. It does have marked cycle lanes on both sides of the road in most places, but there are gaps which do need to be filled, and it does need to be safer. But that's quite a difficult process in terms of the type of exactly how that's going to be developed to make a really safe route on both sides of the road. Certainly at the moment, the green paint really doesn't present much of a safety assistance at all. Particularly where you can see where the on-ramps for the expressway are further down Kapiti Road, where drivers routinely drive in the cycle lanes, cut across them. They have no awareness of whether there are cyclists there, and it does create issues. Yes, we do have commuter routes from that point of view, and they do need to be further developed.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, I just have one more really quick question. Do you think, or is it something the CWB's talked about, or do you personally have any thoughts on something like what Porirua City's doing currently with kind of an e-scooter trial, and having e-scooters available by way of accessing through an app, for example, Lime or Flamingo or those sorts of different brands across?
No, we haven't discussed that. It's something we could look at, but no, it hasn't come up on our program as yet.
Cool.
But it's a possibility.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So,
Yes. Yeah, so I've sent these 3 points through to Jess and the DEM Services team, but essentially just seeking permission from the chair to move that the Climate and Environment Subcommittee issue a vote of thanks to the Cycleway, Walkway and Bridleway Advisory Group for their incredible work and advocacy. To B, note that the CWB terms of reference we brought to Council in July, and that the Climate and Environment Subcommittee note this and also recommend that a fulsome update be provided directly to the whole Council as well, in terms of how this master plan should overlay and sit within our kind of visioning work for the district, and recognising that it needs to be a really important pillar of that mahi. So just noting that. And then also that we note that by sharing the remarkable vision that underlies this plan, we can effectively highlight the immense benefits it will bring to not only our local communities and environment, but to visitors as well, in terms of clean, green ecotourism in Kapiti. So I think Kim was happy to second that. Yeah, cool. So if there's any comments or amendments people would like made to that, but I'll leave that in your hands, Madam
yes.
Chair.
So first of all, I will accept that,
Cool, thank
Councillor
you.
Hanford. And so you've opposed that. We have a seconder. Are there any questions to? So we have the words up there. So if there are no questions, then we'll move to debate for these recommendations. So these are the only recommendations related to this update. So I will take these recommendations as a whole. So for these all 3 recommendations, all those in favour say aye. Those against? The motion is carried. So thank you very much, Councillor Hanford, for putting these motions forward. Thank you very much, Mr Henderson and Janice, for coming along today to give us a very comprehensive update on the work that the CWB has done. And you'll see by the number of questions that something that is very, very, people are very, very interested in that, and we look forward to you bringing this to the full council. One of the things too, maybe, I was going to ask, but I'm not going to now, is about how the relationship between the advisory group and KCDC and the funding mechanism that works in behind that to support your activities. So
Excellent.
thank you very much
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So thank you very much for that presentation. So now we will move on to an update on our reserve management plan. And we have council officers, Gareth Eloff and Mr Mendonca, and coming forward. Who's the other person? Yes. Oh, we actually need another seat, don't we? Yes, so we all, yes, thank you, Luke. So as you're aware, we have many parks and reserves in our district, and this presentation is about how we are going to manage them going forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So thanks for your time this morning, subcommittee members. So reserve management plans, a bit like asset management plans, are much more important than they actually seem. We do have obligations under the Reserves Act 1977 that we must follow in terms of managing our reserves. Now, our reserves, of course, are key pieces of land that often have water flowing through them. So it's not just about the reserve in its legal state, it's about our whenua, it's about our awa, and it is about our environment, our taio. So increasingly, these areas have a lot more pressure on them as we grow, and there's a lot of demand on our reserves now, and that's only going to get more and more strong as more and more people and groups seek to use our fabulous open spaces that distinguish us from the rest of the district. So we've been thinking about this deeply for some time. I know through dealing with many of you at community boards and various community groups that you'll know that we have existing plans in place, but many of them are out of date. The Waimanu Lagoons is one in case. The Waikanae Park was done in 2000. Haruatai Park, 1993, since that was updated. So these things don't really reflect where we are now, where we need to be in the future. So we're working on that. We've got some of the best minds in the country working on it, starting with our own Gareth and Yolanda Morgan. And we've also got some external people helping us out as we work through the reserve management plan process. So I'll hand over to Gareth and Yolanda, who will talk us through a little bit of the detail about what we're up to, where we're going, and then happy to take any questions. Thank you, Gareth.
Yeah, tēnā koutou. Hopefully we can live up to that hype, Mike, but we'll give it a good shot, definitely. Probably as a bit of a highlight reel in this, as Mike alluded to, Reserves Act kind of requires reserve management plans to be put in place. It's essentially a guide for council to look at how we can manage, maintain, and develop reserves and green spaces. The Act also goes a little bit further in terms of stipulating certain requirements and processes around processes, but also in terms of content. So out of those, I think we've got around 19 management plans in place. A lot of them are achieving those objectives to a certain degree. A lot of them are falling a little bit short, but most, if not all of them, are heavily outdated. So a huge piece of work that's required. To contextualize that, across the district, that we've got around 180 discrete reserves comprised of between 500 and 700 parcels of land. So you can see the scale of what's required is quite big. So our intended approach to deal with this is to actually look at developing an omnibus reserves plan. It's probably best practice out there at the moment in terms of addressing particularly huge numbers of reserves. And work's already begun in that space in terms of preparation and understanding the scope and severity of that and what our obligations and opportunities are in that space. We've engaged a company called Thrive Places and Spaces, who are real subject matter experts in this field to help us with understanding what the work is all about. Our next stages in this is to plan how to plan, if that makes sense. And we've presented to Te Whakaminenga o Kapiti recently because our intended approach is to work alongside our mana whenua partners at every level right from the beginning in a co-decision making and also co-design manner. So with that in mind, we are currently working through logistics around setting up a workshop, the first workshop with our 3 partners. We haven't yet set on a date, but we are working with our partners in the meantime. And while that's happening, there's also a lot of due diligence work required. So this is around identifying the land parcels, the underlying land status, gazettal characteristics of those parcels, and a whole lot of homework, basically. So we can come informed, or better informed to those workshops while we start framing up the timeline and seeing how it's going to look going forward. Being a statutory process, once we're ready with that information, we know what we have to do. It will require public notification. At that time, we will publicly notify of our intent to prepare a plan and go through the required or stipulated process accordingly. At that point, we would probably envisage the work to take us around 18 months to complete. So that's in a nutshell where we're at with the reserve management plan process.
So can I just make one point, Madam Chair? So we haven't actually started yet, so it's important to note that we're still in the pre-planning phase and we haven't actually pushed the button in terms of starting the statutory process yet. So very much still planning for our plan. Thank you.
So thank you very much for that update. So are there any questions from the committee? No, there aren't. So I actually have a question. I know this has been a long time coming, but at the end of the day, will it mean with all this, with these plans being, well, the word is whether it's reviewed, updated, or changed, will there be any changes literally on the ground to how these reserves or parks are going to can be used by members of the public, or is that still up for grabs?
Tēnā koutou. Yes, so potentially what will come out of the reserve management plan are changes to what can and can't be done on each of our parcels of land. Essentially, the reserve management plan is a policy document, but it's a policy document that has a statutory basis to it. So if someone comes to us now, for instance, saying they want to do an activity at Whaitua Park, we will, where we do have a plan, although it is very outdated there, we can go to that plan and see if the policy intends for that use of the land. So we're looking at reviewing those policies for all of our land. So there are certainly implications in terms of what can be done on each of the properties depending on what we put in that reserve management plan. So while they're not hard and fast rules like you'll see in a district plan, they're certainly policy intents.
Thank you. So that would be, so when this goes out to consultation, so that would be the types of information that you'd be interested to hear from members of the public?
So there's 2 phases of consultation. Once we notify our intention to prepare the reserve management plan, that's pretty much an open slather for anyone to come to us and say we have an interest, whether it be an interest on all of the parcels of land or an interest in certain areas. We do expect a lot of wide-ranging submissions at that stage. Then we go away and we actually draft the provisions of the plan based on that information that's provided to us, but as well as what we know about our parks and recreation and what the uses of those are. And then we would then put out a draft plan for submissions, very similar to the district plan process.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Black, a
Thank you, Madam
question.
Chair. Kia ora. Thanks for that update. My question is around intensification, population intensification, and how that will impact the plan. What about the subdivisions coming in? Are we going to increase our reserve spaces in future, that sort of thing?
Yes, so in terms of intensification, it's certainly something we're pretty aware of. There are a number of subdivision consent applications in process or having recently been granted that we're aware of. And when those subdivisions do come through to council, we look at those in terms of whether we need additional land to be vested as part of those processes. I guess there's 2 ways to deal with intensification. One is to upgrade our existing assets that we do own, so looking at Waikanai Park, Whaitua Park, how we can invest into those existing assets to make them better and more able to be used by a wider variety of people. And then there certainly is the looking at where intensification is happening, where we're looking at more lots being developed and where that need is going to be. We currently have a performance indicator in our open spaces strategy which says that there'll be some form of open space provision, public open space provision, within 400 metres of every dwelling. So that's something we're quite aware of when subdivisions and larger greenfield type developments are being undertaken. But we have to, I guess, weigh that up a little bit with what we can realistically maintain and operate adequately at an adequate level of service.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for that, the Mayor. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for this. It's great to have this early heads up that this is coming and to keep an eye out for it because it's a really important piece of work. Just wanted a little bit more detail about how it interacts and complements the open spaces strategy.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. They're very complementary. So the open space strategy, we could say, is the enabler of the creation of the space. The reserves management plan will be how we manage it once it's created at the very highest level. So the intents and purposes of acquiring particular pieces of open space, gazetting reserves, will have naturally an overflow into the reserve management plan in terms of capturing that intent and how we're going to manage it to better improve that intent on the space.
Yeah. So it's really great to have the open spaces strategy in place ahead of this piece of work happening. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think it was pivotal actually to have a really fundamental document like that in place at the time of reviewing our reserve management plans.
I think this is a major mechanism for implementation of the open spaces strategy is what this actually gives us.
So thank you very much for this heads up, and yes, it is a very, very important piece of work. So I see that there are no more questions from the committee, so thank you very much for coming along today, and we look forward to seeing how this rolls out and the workshops. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just talking to my support team here, we've decided we're going to have an early morning tea, 10-minute break, and as we have some quite longer presentations afterwards, so 10 minutes, and then the next person to speak will be Rita O'Brien. Thank you very much.